Yellow Kid, Little Nemo, Buster Brown. The first few decades of American newspaper comics saw a youthful cast of precocious heroes, villains, and every shade in between. Subject matters ranged from the urban, practical jokes of Buster Brown to the vast, intricate dreamscapes of Little Nemo and Slumberland. In its first decades, comics entered the world in a glorious explosion of art, vernacular dialogue, and whimsy. Today on Truth Beauty Comics. Welcome to Truth Beauty Comics. I'm Levi, a cartoonist.
And I'm Felix, a guy who likes comics.
And this is the podcast where we look for transcendence in a pulpy medium. And today we're going into a collection. It's not any one particular comic, but we're looking at a collection that we've been kind of teasing for a while. But we're going to be discussing the first chapter of the Smithsonian collection of newspaper comics, probably available at your local public library. So, Felix, was this your first time ever kind of cracking this book, or had you seen it before? Or
Yeah, so you had always talked about it, and I eventually bought it at your recommendation, and then had flipped through it, but had not really read it. And for this first chapter, it's Sunday comics from 1896 to 1916. And I had heard a bunch of the names before. The only one I had ever read before, other than like maybe one Cats and Jammer Kids or two, was Little Nemo and Slumberland. Other than that, these were all new to me. So there was, I don't know, and it was a really kind of strange experience.
right?
The earliest years, I mean, I'm no expert on this. This is sort of more your field, but the early years of the American newspaper comic just feel sort of Wild Westy.
Really?
Like both in terms of kind of subject matter, but also like the art form itself hadn't really settled into conventions. And it's funny because there are certain like very formulaic things. Like there were several strips at this time that are like Little Nemo and Slumberland, where it's basically just like kids' dreams, and then at the in the last panel the kid wakes up or something. But even within the ones that were kind of standard conventions at that time, like there was just this insane level of freedom, which also I think was bolstered by just the sheer amount of space often given for an individual comic strip on the newspaper page. Like we've talked about Prince Valiant before, and that's so sort of stunning, but it's funny coming to these because like none of the ones we read are really adventure strips.
The adventure strip really doesn't appear for the first couple decades at least. In news, kind of what you would associate maybe with early comics. It's much more just all over the place.
Yeah, and so it's kind of they have kind of some of them certainly like a kind of anarchic energy to them that like
really,
sort of like for me at least a little bewildering, because I mean I meant to read through them all twice and I didn't. I read them all once, and I feel like there were some where I was just sort of like they were the school days
Was
ones.
ist das?
And it's just there's just 30 different speech bubbles with no clear kind of sense of time in them, and it's unclear, like, is each one supposed to be a joke? Are they building? Or I
think
I don't know.
Before we even get into the content, I'd say for this one, if dear listener, if you are looking for an introduction into newspaper comics, I'd highly recommend this, because I've gotten a lot of kind of newspaper comic collections whenever they're in print. If they put one out, I try to grab it. Just because I've always loved newspaper comics directly because of this book. But I think this book is probably the best as far as it's edited by Bill Blackbeard and Martin Williams. I don't know Martin Williams. I do know Bill Blackbeard, who's somewhat of a comics historian.
And his work is really top notch. Like I've read some of his introductions to things, and I feel like he just understands the medium of comics and understands individual strips so well. Like he gets the newspaper strip in a way that I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this collection is I think he gives you a real taste for some stuff. So like this first chapter is kind of a scattershot of Sunday newspaper comics for the first couple decades that they were being published, right? It doesn't go real deep on any one. Maybe it gives you a two or three or four at the most of continuity. Later in the series, he will go into like a full kind of story arc. They'll collect certain story arcs here for particular comics. So it's really worth every penny, this collection, because kind of one of the interesting things about it is, I read this as a little kid. It was in our local library, and I'd take it home, and you just can sit with these pictures and just study them. And I think even before I could read, I would look at this because they're so visually
Hmm.
fascinating, some of these comics. But this was the only place you could find a lot of these. Um, it's not like, especially when I was a kid, it's not like they were, printing the Cats and Jammer Kids or the Gumps or something like
Yeah.
that in these big collections like your Calvin and Hobbes or something. They were not in the bookstores. And to this day, a lot of these are still really hard to find. So it's kind of like, oh, you like that one Sunday page? Like, was there more of that? Who knows? It's really hard to find some of these. So it's a little bit of a treasure hunt experience also,
Yeah, a lot of them
as you go through
even
this.
are not archived online.
Right. Yeah.
It's not right. It's not even like, oh, there hasn't been a printing. It's like, there are maybe 5 or 6 extant strips for a strip that lasted, a year or something.
Right. Right. So yeah, I think some artists that I've come across here. This was the first time I ever saw Milton Caniff's work for Terry and the Pirates. Definitely the first time I ever saw it. And these come later. These are more adventure strips, but Roy Crane's work, Little Nemo, Winston McKay, just an absolutely stunning artist, right? But his stuff is still, I mean, I think you can get collections of Little Nemo, but they
Yeah,
are
they've started to
expensive and hard to
print a bit
find.
more. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
there's that one, oh, I forget the name of the publisher, but there's this publisher that, yeah, I want to say in Germany. I think it starts with a T. It's like Tant or something. That's been doing printings every 5 6 years. So Little Nemo is out, and I want to get one of the sort of complete. They have like I think a 2 or 3 volume, and then they have like a big, huge 1 volume omnibus. And I want to get some of them because his art particularly, like, you can just stare at. I mean, that really, I think, is kind of, for me, from this chapter, it's the real standout. Just that at this really early stage of the comic strip, McKay just was able to create these whole worlds that, like, as you're reading the page, you feel like you're in this strange kind of topsy turvy landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk more about those particular ones. Yeah, I gotta think though that they don't sell very well, any of these, when they release them, because they'll sometimes will put out one by one of these artists and I'll buy it as soon as it comes out, but then it's like out of print within a year or something. So they
Yeah.
must do real small runs. And I think the appeal is limited. And honestly, like, I'm not sure how many people are going to listen to this episode, because this is kind of this is not a Batman versus Superman kind of broad appeal. But for those for those Winsor McKay heads out there, this one's for you. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, are you familiar with kind of the historical background of kind of why we have like these comics
I mean,
like this? Or
little bits and pieces of the story, of sort of how, um, particularly how much, like, comics help the sale of newspapers. So, like,
right?
there were
Yeah,
so there were editors who would, various newspapermen who would really prioritize getting comics into their papers, and then, uh, like rivalries and things, but not kind of in real detail.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because this is one of those, like, I think kind of we live in a day where like AI and like all the technologies that are coming out are like kind of harming artists in their
Mm.
work, but this was one of those instances where like it was this really nice kind of harmony of, the emerging of color. People are just figuring out how to print stuff in color. Newspapers were getting more and more popular, and you realize, well, if we put color in our newspapers, they sell more. It was really hard to do, and a tedious process, but helped sales. And so they kind of, and then also the publishers, like, so Hearst and Pulitzer were apparently the two, like, this was like, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of their day, right? Duking it out over kind of market share. And they kind of just gave their artists carte blanche to, just here's a whole page in a massive newspaper, like, go crazy. Because
Yeah.
it was like they needed color content to fill their newspapers, right? They needed these things. And it doesn't, I mean, it seems like it was kind of the Wild West as to, what they would just allow in their pages. I mean,
Yeah.
Crazy Cat is kind of the one of the existing, the ones that are surviving because it's so good. We've talked about it before. But that like weird energy that Crazy Cat has, like, you kind of realize, like, this is not unusual for artists just to do bizarre, strange
Yeah.
stuff in
Yeah.
newspaper comics. I mean, especially if you're used to like Kathy or, For Better For Worse or something,
Yeah, comparing these to Kathy would be
yeah.
so
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. When are we doing the Kathy episode? Uh,
Be a long
yeah.
time before I get
There
that
is just
desperate.
this. I mean, I'm just sort of flipping through the book a little bit, and yeah, and it's just, I mean, the this, there's sort of tropes that come up, right? There's a lot of mischievous little kids and that kind of thing, but I mean, really, you just have like, Alice in Wonderland style, like psychedelic stuff happening. You have uh backstabbing at, upper crust parties. You have like strange allusions to ancient Greek art or, Picasso. You have people shooting cannons. You have, adults like jumping into furnaces. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just this, it is this sort of wild kind of exuberance to it
Yeah.
that I don't know has ever been rivaled. I mean, I like a lot of later strips more. I'd rather sit
Mm-hmm.
down and read Calvin and Hobbes or Foxtrot or Peanuts, but like in terms of just the sheer energy behind it, I don't know if there's ever been something to really compete with these really earliest years of the newspaper strip. Even like the later adventure strip, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I think doesn't have the kind of chaotic energy that these do.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And we've one of the interesting things, yellow journalism. I'm sure you've heard that, right? Which I think when I was looking online, it came from the Yellow Kid, which was like the first, real
Oh,
comic strip character. That's what, sources said online. I don't know. It could be a myth or something like that. I can't be sure. But the Yellow Kid is kind of, and there's some examples of the Yellow Kid in this, and we'll turn there in a minute. But like, it's a totally inscrutable comic to me. I have no
yeah,
idea how
I do
why it was
not get it.
popular. I
Yeah.
mean, artistically, it's really impressive. The drawings are cool, but I've tried reading Yellow Kid stuff, and I'm like, this is just not funny. I don't know what's referencing. It's bizarre. It's a little grotesque. It's just it's it's kind of that transition, I'd almost say, between the editorial cartooning of maybe the previous century that you can kind of see, and then actually something that's its own thing. It's not really commenting on issues so much as just a work in of itself, but it's still very weird feeling,
Yeah, and
and
it's
hard to
funny because
understand.
something like Crazy Cat is sort of bewildering, but it's clear that there's something on the other side. Like you sometimes start, like, I think of this, I think of something like, this may be a funny comparison, but like David Foster Wallace, you pick up particularly Infinite Jest, most famously, but a lot of his work, his fiction, you pick it up and it's sort of like there's this bewildering wall of text, but it's
Hmm.
also like clear that there's something on the other side that it rewards engagement, right? Or like Moby Dick or something like this,
G.K.
where
Chesterton too,
there's no, but
at times.
he's not on that kind of like because Chesterton isn't like but like intentionally obfuscating like his meaning, right?
Yeah.
Like the kind of games that like Melville plays where he'll just
Right.
like
Right.
you just get to a chapter and suddenly it's written as though it's a play. Um,
Okay.
or you have like these strange like reflections on mortality in the middle of like, waiting for a whale to show up.
Hmm.
That just kind of come out of nowhere. And Crazy Cat is kind of like that where it's like, okay, this is dense, this is hard, this is demanding, but like there is a lot going on here, clearly.
Right. Right.
Um, Whereas some of these, like I think of that one, I mean, we're hoping, dear listener and dear viewer, uh, this time to use newfangled camera technology and actually show you some of the comics. If you go to our YouTube channel, Truth Beauty Comics on YouTube.com, if it works out well.
Yeah. We'll see.
But there are some like school days that like I just do not get it. Like it's just there's 20 text bubbles and there's not a clear order to them, and it's not clear when I'm supposed to laugh. And I mean, like there's some of that, right? Like in something like Crazy Cat where like it's not necessarily like always laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
It is oftentimes it'll be, in the middle panel or something rather than at the end. But like after I've read a bit of Crazy Cat, I kind of get into it and I understand the sort of vernacular of it. In a way that with these earliest strips, like and granted I've spent more time with Crazy Cat than I have with these, but like these, it's just like some of them it is just not clear to me what's on the other side. Like what
Right.
like if I like is there a kind of hermeneutic key I'm missing? And once I get it, it'll be like, School Days is this great forgotten classic or something,
Right.
The Yellow Kid really needs a rediscovery. Um, or if it's just like this was such a nascent art form that it just hadn't sort of figured itself out.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, one of the interesting things that led to the popularity of comics, like the readership for newspaper comics was children. Obviously, were big readers, so that was an appeal because they would press. It's a family newspaper, so they tell their parents go pick up the newspaper because they're looking forward to reading these
Yeah.
stories. So there's an appeal there, but also apparently like immigrants. It was a high time of immigration in the country, so kind of people who weren't really good English speakers. And if you notice, there's a lot of ethnic humor in these comics.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Not necessarily mean spirited, probably not something that would ever make it through today, but it kind of makes sense if immigrants are like a big part of your readership because they may not be great English speakers, and some of the humor might be they might appreciate it being kind of dealing with gentle ethnic integration issues. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to know exactly 100 plus years later what really is going on in some of these, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Should
I
we
think
should we dive in?
oh, sure. I just
Go
want to say
ahead.
one
Sorry.
thing that was sort of on that point, and then let's do it. With some of the ethnic humor, there is. I think sometimes the ways that we talk about older ethnic humor, says the white guy in a collared shirt, um, kind of oversimplify the situation on the ground, is my sense, because um, we do a lot of kind of importing of contemporary political problems into it. And there were major political problems around integration, know nothingism, all that, right? Uh, uh, but I do think I think sometimes I'll at least say I could imagine, right, sort of being an immigrant, like a German immigrant, really enjoying some of the kind of German ethnic humor that, like,
Right.
yeah, maybe sometimes the Germans are kind of the butt of the joke, but also like you're sort of seeing yourself in them. Um, I think of some of the all like I think of some of the kind of blowback against Apu in The Simpsons. Um, who
Right.
like is a character who a like personally I don't know if I'm allowed to say this because I haven't like an Indian wife, but like I find some of the Indian humor funny. Like it's like sometimes it's really funny. But also even apart from that, like he is quite a good character in some of the Apu focused
Hmm.
episodes. And you hear these stories of kids who are like bullied and called up who in elementary school and things like that. But then you also hear stories of kids who like that was the Indian they saw on TV and like
Right.
they were glad there was one. Um and and I do like I can definitely imagine like you know a German immigrant living in a kind of German ghetto who gets the newspaper and every week there is this there are a couple comics that are consistently showcasing like the hijinks of little German kids and it has little German phrases thrown in and it says und instead
Yeah.
of and things like that like I can you know it's sort of like there's I live in for those who don't know absolute middle of nowhere North Country New York like uh the top quarter of the state basically is one representative district. We have one congressman or woman for like the top quarter geographically of the states. Like that gives you a sense of how important we sort of are considered by the rest of the world. There's this one Simpsons episode where they're going, I think, to Niagara Falls, and they drive through upstate New York, and there's this parody of New York, New York that's upstate New York, and it's the funniest thing in the world. And my wife and I reference it to each other pretty regularly and I'll sing bars of it, and it's all just kind of about how upstate New York is a whole, and just like if you can't make it anywhere, you can make it here, and like Homer in the sort of like music video ish thing becomes mayor of like I think it might be Rochester, or so, I mean it just like it's hilarious, just all about like the streets are like caving in and cars are falling into it and like stores are closed all the time and the populations are just going down and it's like it's really funny and like I sort of appreciate like and it's not even like about exactly where I live, it's hours from me, but it's still like the universe it's sort of the universe I live in, which like does not get national attention normally. um and so it's almost like a kind of compliment and like you can argue there's a like kind of if you're so oppressed anything feels great, but like also it's just sort of fun to see yourself or something like you
Right.
presented. So and also some of these artists were of ethnic descent themselves, so
Right.
it's a very complicated I think this
Yeah.
conversation is often kind of oversimplified as just like white people buying papers and making fun of like black people and Mexicans, and I think it's much more I think it's much more complicated than that. I think there's a lot more just like people having fun. I don't know. Yeah,
I
but
agree. I think there's also like, I mean, with not to go down the ethnic humor, the only thing I'll add to that is humor is one of the ways you diffuse tension between
yeah,
people, and obviously it can be used in very cruel and oppressive ways. And, I'm not advocating for any of that, but it is a way to diffuse tension. And make it, when people start laughing, at themselves and at each other, there's a way in which that can be very healthy for groups of people trying to integrate.
yeah, I think that's
It can be
right.
a way that's really unhealthy too. But I think we might have swung a little. If we lose humor altogether and ethnic humor altogether, then we're losing a useful tool we have for actually kind of integrating. So
Yeah.
yeah.
One quick little thing on this, and then we really will get to the comics. as we're recording, um, yesterday was the sort of my wife is very into the Olympic figure skating. I love we both love the Winter Olympics. But there was this tweet from several years ago, um, about sort of the plans for the Italian Olympics that sort of say like Olympic Committee, all right, Olympics are in 5 years in Italy. Have you got that rink ready? Oh yeah, oh yes, the rink is almost done. And then like, all right, we're a year out. Is the rink ready? Oh, it's almost done, almost done. It's gonna be perfect. And then, all right, the Olympics are in 2 days. How's the rink looking? We know build the rink. And yesterday there were, I think it was like 24 skaters in this one event, and uh I think it was 21 of them, something like that. This crazy high number fell on the ice. These are Olympians, right? Training full
Oh, gosh.
lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there were issues with the rink, like there were issues with the ice. And actually, the only like two of the three countries that didn't fall were like places that have kind of like don't have a lot of money. And so like the guy who won was from Kazakhstan, and there was speculation that like they're a lot more used to
Rough
skating on
ice.
red ice, and so they were kind of able to deal with it in a way that like some of the sort of greatest skaters in the world that were like everyone knew, okay, this one's going to be gold, this is going to be silver, this is going to be bronze, almost certainly all did terribly and were literally falling over themselves.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
and like just so the kind of I think we're still allowed to make certain good-hearted Italian jokes in part because they just tend to be pretty accurate. Uh, but anyway, let's
Yeah.
let's let's get into the comics.
All right. I'm going to pop open the screen here and we'll see if this
This,
works.
by the way, for anyone who has not ever seen it, is a huge book. It's got to
Yeah.
be
It's very
about
large.
18, 19 inches tall, and it's sort of it's quite something to lug around. But it just is so nice to be able to see, particularly these Sunday strips, closer closer to the size that they were, because like it really would just basically not be readable at a small scale, which I think also is sort of part of why there's a um, tendency not for these to be reprinted very much.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree on that front. It's, I mean, these, we talked about this a bit in Prince Valiant as well, but these were printed even larger than they would be in here, right? So they're shrunk down even somewhat,
Yeah,
I
it's like
believe.
I think they were like more than twice the size. Like they were just massive.
Yeah. I mean, it's really remarkable.
And so you can
Um,
particularly understand a kid like just looking, sort of spreading the comics page, like I did as a kid, but each page would, when I was a kid, have 4, 5, 6 Sunday comics, whereas this would have a whole comic. Yeah, so
yeah.
here we are to the opening 2 pages with the yellow kid in Hogan's Alley, and then something called Johnny Wise, which was both of these I just like striking art, completely bewildering to me. I have no idea what's going on. Like I read the words and
Yeah.
it's a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Johnny Wise is a little bit scrutable if you really squint. The print
Yeah, and there's
is,
there's a clear sort of order of one, two, three. So there is a plot, but it's
yeah.
such a strange. uh it's just like not at all the way anyone would do a comic now, right? That you've got
Yeah.
the picture of this sort of striking kind of portrait of this strange smiling guy with a big cigar, and then around it you have the story. So I did figure that one out. I didn't love it. It wasn't like this is a hidden gem, but I sort of got it. The yellow kid, like
I,
it's just, yeah. Go ahead. You take it.
no, I mean, yeah. Before we leave Johnny Wise, one of the things I do like about these is just the weird like vernacular that they do. So the
Yeah,
punchline is, I mean, the punchline, such as it is Johnny Wise is this kind of whippersnapper who's trying to cheat this guy, steal money from him. He's taking him around town. In the end, he ends up stealing just like old lottery tickets. He thought he was getting his wallet. but the punchline is, wouldn't dat take the butter off the table? I mean, it's a really like, I've never heard this expression before. So some of these just has some really funny, like, I don't know. He goes, he gosh, yeah, he
Yeah, I should teach that
proceeds
to
to
my
buy him some
3-year-old next
wet
time he's sort
food.
of jumping up and down, throwing a tantrum like Johnny Wise. Of wouldn't that take the butter off the table? Like,
Yeah, it's just like, wow, there's just some interesting. I mean, this is 120 years from 120 years ago, so you know, there's definitely times have changed. What do
yeah.
you think? So looking at this Hogan's Alley thing moving over there, the yellow kid. I mean, what's it is. I've never bothered to read this because it doesn't make a lot of sense when I do, like the parts that I've read. Um, but like, what do you think? Just kind of looking at it?
I mean, it is striking. Like the
Yeah.
Hogan's Alley, I could, I kind of like, oh, that's strange, huh? But or sorry, not the Hogan's Alley, sorry, the Johnny Wise kind of like, oh, that's strange, all right. The Hogan's Alley, like, there is a lot to look at. Like, I can imagine, my 3-year-old particularly, he loves comics. His favorite, he and his brother love, uh, Barks's Duck comics, Donald and Scrooge, and and just love to look at sort of images like that. And I can see particularly a little kid loving this, right? You've got a parrot, right, on a kind of circus thing. You've
Mm-hmm.
got a goat 3/4 of the way up a big step ladder. You have kids doing gymnastics, uh, on a pole, and then also on a like mattress on the floor. You've got a kid that I don't know if he's supposed to be a personification or something, but you've got this, small kid lifting up huge weights. There
Wait.
are
Yeah.
people playing cards and smoking. You got this really strange, like creepy dude looking
Yeah.
over
What the
the
heck is up with this guy?
like I have no idea what that's about, but like there's a lot to look at. Like it is, and it's very dynamic. You have quite the depiction of a black child. You've got people
Yeah.
boxing with huge gloves. Like it does draw your eye. Um, but and
Yeah.
sort of as a grown like trying to read it, right? I sort of see notice and then almost illegible cursive, and then another notice written by a kid. The directions of the club has tried to arrange for a good fight, but they are afraid if ain't good scrappin' is to be had, that some of the amateur members will have to do it. Professional fighters won't fight. Something ain't nothing nen. And then, and at the bottom it's opening of the Hogan Valley
Yeah.
Athletic Club. And like, so I kind of get the setup. It's like Hogan's Alley is,
Yeah.
having, the kids, the inmates are running this island. The kids are doing all the
Yeah.
athletic stuff. Um, and like that's sort of fun, but also like, what the heck?
Right. I mean, there's just weird little like this here. There's this girl in the corner that says, "I am shy above her head," and there's cards in this. I don't. I have no clue what's going on there. And there's
Yeah.
just a lot of this. Like, I don't know why there's this creepy clown in here. Um, I think the thing that I would say about this that does jump out at me is the art is really, really good. Like the figures rendered here are like, especially stuff like the kids swinging on these kids, on
Yeah.
this kind of bar here. This is like, if you saw this, like a lot of artists today would love to be able to draw this good. It's really high quality. Um, and the color itself is also really different than what we'll get in later newspaper comics. It's a lot more subtle.
That's true.
It looks almost
It's
more
kind
like a
of painterly in a
watercolor.
way that later things
Yes.
won't be.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that gets lost, long before, I was born, really in the 50s, they started switching their color process um, away from this, because this was really like the way you had to do this was really difficult. But it kind of actually gave the colorists, the people who actually did these colors, they were like artists in themselves. And it was all done with like special like dot screens and stuff. But you would kind of brush it on and roll it on. You could get some really interesting textures that they don't have anymore. Um, yeah, two more. I think as if we're moving on to Buster Brown, two
Yeah,
more
so the
totally
Buster Browns,
inscrutable comics.
um, these Buster Browns, I like did not get at all, but I kind of like. Um, Particularly this one, like I I feel like a Gen Z person because I find this cursive just such a pain, to like squint at, and it's
Right.
dear mom, I am sending you here with a photograph of myself taken by a traveling photographer, but it's just so tiny that I have to like I feel like either an old man taking off his glasses or like a Gen Z who was never taught to read cursive. Um, but it's so strange, like they're getting a photo, a proper like portrait taken of all the animals on the farm, and it's such a funny little composition. I don't even exactly have anything to say about it, other than like all these animals have such distinct personalities, in a way
Yeah, it's
that's really
odd.
impressive.
It's
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of clear talent here from RF Outcult, uh, whom I've never heard of other than here. Uh, but yeah, there is a real talent there that I sort of get better why someone would really want to see Buster Brown each week in a way that I struggle a bit more with the Yellow Kid. And I mean they weren't. I'm just going to check the year, right? So the Yellow Kid one was about a decade before these first two Buster Brown. And in that time, it does seem like I don't know, the setup is just a lot easier to grasp. Um,
Yeah, I was going to
and
comment on that
yeah,
because you do see there's a lot of stuff that's and this is what one of that struck me as like this is almost like transitional between like editorial cartoon and an actual like sequential comic, recognizably. Um,
yeah, the
so
Buster
you
Brown on the
you have some
Strand, yeah,
panels
with the
here. We
Roosevelt
see
sign.
Yeah, you see dialogue bubbles. The same kind of here. These are both pretty similar. But if we turn the page, and this is like 10 years later, we have like a much more recognizable like newspaper comic for Buster Brown.
Yeah, I love that
Here it's
one, that
still
1913 one.
yeah, yeah. And so I mean now we have like we have six whatever 12 panels here. It's much more like something you could pick up and go, oh, this is a comic that I'm reading, not just a like illustration with a couple panels.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and it's
it's
and
interesting to
it's
see
it's
even how that develops.
yeah, and this one really like is really fun and creative. Just of the kids buying a whole bunch of pumpkins cheaply, and then they just carve
Mm-hmm.
a bazillion jack-o'-lanterns, hide them hide them inside of the house, and the two maids, think, "Oh, did you hear that murder?" And they're just seeing like all through the house all these jack-o'-lanterns, getting freaked out that there are people there, and they realize they're pumpkins. What do you think of that? Let's throw them out the window, and they throw them out, and they land on the kid's head, and then there's the little like weird lesson type thing at the end. And it's still very very strange, but like this is, as you said, really recognizably like a Sunday comic strip. I see this and it's like I can see a very clear line from that to kind of anything I grew up reading in the 90s.
Right.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. Like I like all the pumpkins. I like the art,
Yeah.
the horrified uh Edvard Munchish faces of the freaked out maids.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah,
I
there's a
mean,
lot to like
that's,
in that one.
yeah. And I think that's where you start to see just more, even like comic technique happening, right? Where we're setting a scene. So there's perspectives changing. We have a rhythm too. It's not just like one shot that you have to like read all these different things going on. It's like, it's telling a story. And it's picking moments to show. And I do particularly love this one just because there's something kind of spooky about it, and just the artwork I think is really good in it. Also, I mean, again, we're clearly not. It's not really ethnic humor, but it's we have Irish maids pretty clearly, um, uh, followed by then we get to if we leave Buster Brown, now we're into very German humor here, where the Cats and
Yeah,
Jammer
with Cats and
Kids.
Jammer
Have you heard of
Kids
the
and
Cats and Jammer
Hans
Kids
und
before?
Fritz.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I had seen Cats and Jammer Kids like online. I'd looked it up because of references, and actually, I so there were two. I might be mixing things up, but I think there were sort of two main kind of writer artists of the Cats and Jammer Kids, and I think the first one's Rudolph Dirks, and then the second one I forget the name of. The second one actually married a much younger woman who lived in Vermont um, for decades after he passed. And a friend of mine who's an old newspaper comics fan, um, not only old in the sense of him being old, but in the sense that he's really into the older comics, um, got to know her and like got to see a bunch of originals from I think like the 20s and
Gosh,
30s,
that'd be
which
amazing.
really cool to sort of talk with him about it. But yeah, I like but I really have not kind of had a lot of exposure to Cats Jammer Kids because it is one of those comics that gets referenced a lot. Um
Yeah.
Hans und Fritz I had heard of but never looked up before. And they are kind of similar, both of them, right? They have this sort of uh right, they're both by Rudolph Dirks. They're both about kids making German kids making trouble and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um and they're both this is where where the comics start to well, some of them like these are a bit funny to me. Like they're still strange, they're
Yeah.
still like hard to follow. I'm still figuring out like why, right, on the Hans und Fritz it's like what's with this guy showing up shooting the doorknob off, and it's like shooting his gun a lot, and so they want to scare him out of the house. Like it's sort of hard to follow a bit, but like
Hmm.
I kind of get it a bit more, and it's interesting too that they're like this is where I mean at least in this sort of collection, this is where the slapstick really enters more because I mean
Yeah.
there's a kind of slapstick humor to the Yellow Kid in Hogan's Alley, um, but like this is much more like a punch. There's a literal Punch and Judy show going
Yes.
on, sort of in the Cats and Jammer Kids one, which I thought was really creative. And Yeah, and so like there are the kind of the comics are sort of coming together a little bit more.
Right.
Even though they wouldn't be sort of like in my top 20 favorite strips or anything, but they are kind of coalescing into like a sense of sequential narrative, uh, recurring characters, a clear setup, um, trying to sort of end on a gag and have some funny stuff on the way there. Yeah, what do you think of these two?
I think these are interesting because I mean, yeah, I agree. They're more again. I mean, they almost have a little bit of Huey, Louie, and Dewey about them in Donald Duck, kind of their
Yeah,
early antagonistic adventures. But they're funny to me. I mean, they're funny in a strange sort of way. Kind of the dialogue. Uh, just he's hammering a concertina onto this guy's leg that he's wouldn't spot where he's replaced his leg. He goes, "It's a shame for this nice concertina, but such is life." Just strange little things like
yeah,
that. I kind of find funny, um, but also I think recognizably, if you compare the art here, to something like Yellow Kid and Buster Brown, you're seeing kind of a develop of like a comic style,
Yeah.
where it's much more something that looks almost Disney-esque. It's a lot more exaggerated features, a lot rounder shapes, a lot simpler shapes. We're not going for naturalism at all. So yeah, I think it's an interesting development. I'm not sure if this was, if he was kind of the pioneer, a pioneer in this, or if this is just one example, but it's something more comic-y that you're seeing as far as the artwork goes too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, yeah. Let's talk Little Nemo.
And then we get to Little Nemo and Slumberland, which is a treasure. So for those unfamiliar with Little Nemo and Slumberland, it's one of those comics where it just has like what would what at least to me sounds like the most like constricting, uninteresting premise imaginable. Um, it reminds me there's this web comic called Dinosaur Comics where it's the exact same comic, like the same panels every single comic, except it's different words in the word balloons. And so it's like the
Right.
same number of interactions, the same characters are speaking at the same time, but they're saying completely different things every day. So Little Nemo and Slumberland, right? Every single one is a kid dreams, and then in the last panel wakes up. But somehow Winsor McCay, the artist, just I mean, like I was saying earlier, makes these worlds. I don't know. What do you first kind of generally on Little Nemo and then these in particular, what do you I don't know, as
Yeah.
kind of an artist particularly, what do you think of these strips?
I mean, these strips are incredible. I will say, Winsor McKay's style, I think, is very recognizable, right? I kind of prefer a more loose, sketchy style myself, but he might be like one of like the best draftsmen who has ever lived. Like, it is utterly incredible when you look at what he does here, just like every week. And I've never seen one where I'm like, oh, that doesn't look very good. He's kind of like a there's a certain artist who just died. He's a South Korean artist. I forget his name, but he would do these live drawings that are just kind of mind blowing online. And it's really bugging me. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but it's one of those things like literally I could practice my entire life and never be able to draw like that. Like it's something in this guy's brain that he's like a Michael Jordan, kind of drawing. And I kind of feel like that way about Winsor McCay. Like this guy is just like flexing all over the page every Sunday, and it's just really incredible. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say, but other than like he might be like one of the top 10 best artists or draftsmen who has ever lived.
Yeah. And these and he's applying his skill to such strange matter. So we have four Little Nemo comics here that are sort of telling a semi-connected story between the dream of these two like very well-dressed, I don't know with their hats if they're supposed to be like policemen or something.
Policemen,
Um
bobbies, or
and
yeah,
and this like kind of savage, very very ethnically drawn savage uh like initially walking through this space that like stretches their bodies insanely, and just the kind of panel layout here um
yeah,
I don't is well beyond anything we've seen up to this point. um and then I quite like the second one where they're looking at a giant book and seeing all these different
right,
illustrations with descriptions underneath of, you know, a beautiful woman, won't you be my Valentine, little Nemo? I'll be thine. And then, old King Morpheus in repose, you look like a brewery sign, and goes on, and then there's a few others. And then
yeah,
finally you get sort of drawing of little Nemo with very frizzled hair. You frizzle-headed Nemo, get back into your nest. Wake up, get up, or go to sleep so we can get some rest. Uh, Sorry, get back into your nest and then rest is the rhyme. Um, and then it sort of goes to Nemo having fallen out of bed and having to get back in. I really like that one. And then, turning the page
Yeah.
to the last two, it becomes this strange, I don't know, MC Escher-esque uh kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. Like the building is upside down, and so they're having to like climb and
Yeah.
try not to fall. And it's yeah, it's sort of bewildering, but like in a really, I don't want to say a more comprehensible way, but like very unlike everything that came before. Like this really,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. It really it pulls me in. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think to me when I look at this, the reason it works a little more is because it's so grounded, the renderings, that the kind of whimsicalness you can like this would be a lot less interesting if it was less exquisitely rendered, if it was much more cartoony or less detailed. And this is what I'm talking about when he's like flexing all over the page, because like
Yeah.
this kind of perspective with this level of detail and intricacy is a nightmare to draw as well as he's doing here. Where if you look at like trying to get these perspectives right and all these different things and these arches and everyone is perfect. This like the amount of detail that he puts in some of these panels, with these really intricate windows and crown moldings around all these doors and hallways. I'm just looking at this going like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine how laborious this would be to draw and then to get it so right, but I think that that's part of the charm of it is that they're so well rendered. Like when you get to the bottom of this last one where they're like, now they're outside, but their gravity's pointing the wrong way. That they're like,
Yeah.
okay, what do we do now? It puts you in that situation of like, oh yeah, what would I do in here? Um, so it's really fun just to behold.
It also just occurred to me that this predates MC Escher.
Really interesting.
Yeah, like because Escher was born at the tail end of the 1800s, and I think didn't really get going until like the 30s or at the very least the 20s. And this is 1908. I doubt there's any influence there, but it's just striking that there's a really similar kind of thing going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right,
I
let's
mean,
keep going.
these
So we've
are
got
a
some more.
great sample. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a few strange ones. These like Kinder kids, more
Yep.
of the kind of German kid humor, which, clearly the early 20th century just couldn't get enough of German kids, is
Apparently not.
extraordinarily strange. But like the the art on the first one with the massive boat and the kids' little boats and the Statue of Liberty, wait, I mean, just it's and the buildings like that does kind of strike me. But other than that, I have like nothing to say about that about that one.
I actually have a collection of the Kinder Kids. I forget
Oh
where I
yeah.
got it, but yeah, just purely because of the art. It's very strange. I find it really appealing. I mean, it's weird. It's grotesque. But yeah, there's just something about it. Some of these that I really um, the art, just particularly, I just really really
Yeah.
like.
Well, and the coloring too, like
To
the coloring on that second
Yeah,
one, is just, unlike anything you would not see that in sort of later newspaper printing, and you also would not see something like that with digital printing. Um,
yeah,
or even really with like the sort of European style with like Mobius or other things like that. Like there's like this
hmm
is not like other things that I have seen, other comics I have seen in terms of the coloring. In a really good way.
yeah, and that's just some of the stuff I want to point out is just look how painterly this is right up here. These colors. Down here on the details on these clouds. It's like so soft and I don't know. I think this is really a high point for me. Up until they switched processes in like the 50s or 60s, really to a different process. Because you just you get these soft kind of colors that are so beautiful at points that really are not to be seen until you get to much like basically today. I see some stuff that approaches this in comics with like more digital coloring, but this kind of level of color really vanished for a good 60 years.
Now, the newlyweds and their baby, I just thought sort of striking compositionally because the setup is everybody is at like a big party wearing their finery and saying, so happy for this wonderful couple. They've just had their first child. What a perfectly beautiful baby, and just being extraordinarily complimentary. And then you get, but this, and then the couple and the baby are saying, well, I guess we surprised them. I'll bet they never attended anything finer. And they all like Snookums. And the baby says, "Da." And then you just have these images of all the people talking about how terrible they were.
Yeah,
And it's just sort of,
it's odd.
it's not really like it did not make me laugh, but it's kind of interesting, like compositionally, in terms of
Yeah,
the sort of here are a bunch of different viewpoints. That was all I really had to say on that. Uh, Mr.
yeah. I
Tweediddle.
think I
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, interesting. This one's interesting to me. This next
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Mr. Tweediddle. I was going to say like that one after. I mean, it's this kind of dreamscape type thing, where again it's kind of Alice in Wonderland esque, with these really strange. What do they call them again? The king
Moodles.
of the mirage moodles, and then more of the mirage moodles. They look basically like those big inflatable
They do.
things in front of like car dealerships and stuff.
Yeah.
Where they kind of like
Yeah.
look like they're waving at you. Just really strange. And I would be interested to see more Mr. Tweedledee, Mr. Tweedledee.
Yes. Me too. And it's an interesting one because there's no it's somewhat kind of similar to a Prince Valiant in that it's all there's no word balloon, so it's all written out. But yeah, I would definitely read more of this. It's a very well drawn but strange story that I've like you're just kind of dropped in media res to this story and you don't really know where it's going and maybe there's I don't know, is there a larger plot that we're following or what, but this is kind of one of those examples of like where it's like you see this and you're like, how would I ever find more of this? Like,
Yeah.
is this totally lost? Is it, could I ever, get a collection? But unlikely for Mr. Tweediddle. One I
Ooh,
wanted to point out on the
Fantagraphics.
next page here.
Fantagraphics did print a Mr. Tweediddle. It's by the way, we should mention it's by the guy who
Really?
came up with Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. But yeah, so about 14 years ago, it's out of print, 128 pages, Mr. Tweediddle. So I'm sure they go for a lot on, you know, on the secondary market. But I'm glad that Fantagraphics, they just do such great work with the reprints.
Yeah,
I've sort of waxed poetic about them
they
with,
really
oh
do.
wow, you can get Mr. Tweediddle for like 50, $60 on eBay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one
Okay.
for 40 right now. All right, so if you want to get more Mr. Tweediddle,
Okay.
get your Tweediddle fix, then
Go on eBay.
you can. Um, on the next page, so the next one is this strange, I think like actually an Alice in Wonderland ripoff slash Little Nemo ripoff that I don't know about you,
Yeah.
I don't have much to say about, but the Naughty
Not that
Pete on the
interesting.
next page,
Yeah.
yeah, the Naughty Pete might be
So good.
probably my favorite, honestly, in this whole section. I mean, the family, right? I mean, it's exactly what it says in the name. It's a little boy who's
Yeah.
naughty. the family gets this gorgeous reproduction of winged victory, which they place on, my dear, I brought you a gift in honor of our wedding day, and they put it up. They put it up on the. I assume it's their anniversary or something. They put it up on the end of the bottom of the banister of
Bannister.
the for
Yeah.
for the staircase, and there, let it stand as an imperishable tribute to culture in the home. I feel like this is like kind of like my wife and I before we had kids, and then don't play near the
Right.
statue, Pete, you might break it. And the little boy says, I wonder why Pa brought that mummy home. I'm not going to let a mummy interfere with my fun. And he starts zooming down the staircase and stops. I can put on the brakes like an auto. I bet I can do it backwards just as easy. Goes backwards, goes down the whole thing. I wish I had eyes in the back of my head. And of course doesn't stop and smashes. Here's a chance for Wing Victory to fly. Falls, gets destroyed. I guess Pop was right. And but the in
Yeah.
addition to really enjoying the dialogue, just the way the panels are set up here is amazing.
Yeah.
That like if you're assuming we got the YouTube video to work, if you're interested, go on the YouTube video and come into like an hour into the video and find this, or like Google it, because this comic, I mean, you're the artist. Go ahead and talk about it. But this, like, I was just so
Yeah.
amazed by how perfectly laid out this page was. Like this is better
Yeah.
than like a lot of really excellent contemporary cartoonists that I think of as being good at layout.
Yeah, totally agree. This one is just and the color is so cool too. He's really only using two colors, kind of a red, green, and then white, maybe a little blue accents here and there. Um, but yeah, it just it's something I would hang on my wall. It's so cool. It just
Yeah, I would
it's
absolutely.
really it's a great little
Yeah.
self-contained story that it's a Sunday comic, but it reminds me of stuff like maybe Bill Watterson would do later. Try to
Yeah.
experiment with really creative layouts. But this is just fantastic. And it would be so cool to read this and like the have this in the full size, open up the paper and see something like this because it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that he kind of like draws your eyes through, I don't know, like,
Hmm.
and how the staircase itself becomes a part of the comic, that you get the one shot of the whole thing, and other than that it's bits and pieces, but you get the shot of the whole thing. But like, a staircase is not an easy square. Like, how are you gonna make this work? And then he like, yeah, it's so, and I love the dark black borders.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
that is just, and that especially kind of works well with the kind of like red and green and almost like reddish brown sort of the
Hmm.
staircase. Like it just, it really makes the kind of I don't want to say subdued color, but idiosyncratic use of color really pop.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet.
I want to look up more Charles Forbull and get a sense if there's kind of much else that we have by him.
Right. I know. I believe I've looked into it. I can't remember what else he did, but this is one of those that was so impressive to me. Even little things that he's doing, like he's way better with motion here. He's got these little puffs of air going by that it's really innovative to show speed. Yeah, it's one of these strips though that when people talk about like how bad it is that the way they've shrunk down comics and kind of what comics became in the newspaper, it's stuff like this that makes you realize, oh, okay, yeah, there was definitely something lost here because it's such a big canvas for an artist to play on. It would not work in any other kind of medium. It just even digitally, like this would not, if you saw this on Instagram or something, like you need it to be like a good size, like in a book to read it. And it's just sad that comics didn't keep this level of artistic kind of creativity um, for the future. But
Yeah. All right. And so for the last like five or six, I really have very little to say. I mean, the one is really creative with
yeah,
the sort of integration of a bunch of different modern art styles with the little girl.
right.
Um, but I don't kind of have like, even though it's really creative, it didn't grab me in the way that some of the others did. And the rest of them are kind
Yeah.
of like, some of them are kind of funny, and then there's School Days, which I've already sort of spoken about my confusion of. But I don't know if there are any that you particularly want to kind of mention before we.
I would read more of Bear Creek, folks. I like the art in it quite a bit, and this is the only place I've ever encountered it. By Bear Creek Folks by Charles M. Payne. It's an interesting kind of animals, talking animals, almost like a maybe an Appalachian Wind in the Willows kind of situation. I don't, I'm not
Yeah,
really sure what to make of it, but I do like the art and kind of this style, kind of the Bigfoot, style is going to pop up a lot more. So I don't know if Payne was like an early innovator in that or not, but I like it a lot here. I think it looks good. I wouldn't mind reading more of it. We get some Mutt and Jeff. Maybe we can kind of close out. Now, Mutt and Jeff are interesting. They were a real big hit. I think they're kind of early. One of these characters that I don't know. I still see them every now and then. I don't think they're like I think I'm sure they're public domain, but it seems like they've lasted a little bit into some fringes of the kind of like Little Nemo. Like some people know
yeah,
about Little Nemo, um, but they're it's almost you see kind of traces of like Andy Cap sort of stuff here. That is
yeah,
if we're looking at newspaper comics, but obviously in a much more kind of lavish form in their early days.
yeah, yeah. I kind of get why people would like them, but they don't speak to me.
Yeah, I agree that it's kind of like bad husbands, loser guys. Maybe not a lot has changed in some aspects of the humor. They're just trying to gamble and drink and keep
I know
out,
people complain about the media
and fool their
depiction
wives.
of husbands and fathers now, but it's it's always been there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, any final thoughts before as we kind of wrap up here?
I mean, this was really, really just fun to kind of dig into these earliest days. We'll be spending more time on sort of the rest of the collection, and so we'll get into some of the later decades. But it's been really interesting to sink my teeth into these earliest comics because it is, as we've said throughout, it's so experimental, and
Yeah.
it's just there's such a variety to it. It's, it's funny, but it kind of reminds me of the earliest days of YouTube. When you'd have like,
Yeah.
maybe it's just going to be a vlog, maybe it's going to be a video of a zoo, maybe it's going to be this like intricate, like scripted series like Lonely Girl 15, where you have this whole plot given over the course of like a year, or just a little later, but like the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, where you get an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice through, as though they're like YouTube videos that people are making, and actually happening today. And these, there's this kind of just sort of energy to it, vitality, that
Yeah.
even though they're mostly not things that I would want to kind of sit down and read for pleasure all the time. Um, I can see how they planted the seeds also for a lot of what came later. The things that I do have really a deep love for. The one
Hmm.
kind of asterisk would be Little Nemo and Slumberland. Like I would spend a lot of time with Little Nemo.
Yeah. Yeah. I think from my perspective, I would just recommend, this I love this collection so much. It's almost like this. It's going off of your YouTube analogy. Like most of the media kind of like, say you think films, right? You think videos on YouTube, right? Music, all this kind of creative stuff we have available that kind of at our fingertips. So if we want to go digging, it's really easy to find, and we can dig these things up and they're archived online, right? um, but there is like a creative world in newspaper comics that is largely lost. At least it's not very accessible, right?
Yeah.
But it does have that same kind of like creative vitality, creative energy. Not all of it's great, not all of it totally works, but it is really inspiring, really interesting, to read, and can be really delightful. Some of it's just some of my favorite stuff ever. We haven't really got to that stuff yet, but it's there. So this to me is just a real treasure of a volume to have, because it kind of can point you in any direction. You can say, oh, I really want to investigate this and learn more about this figure, and kind of hunt that down and learn, okay, who is Winsor McKay? What is Little Nemo? And there's a lot more there than just what you find here,
Yeah.
but it does kind of give you at least a taste of what was going
Yeah.
on that can kind of get you moving. It's been a
Yeah.
great resource to me, and I just enjoy reading it whenever I pull it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna be recommending this collection to friends. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to spending more time on it, which we'll do in 2 episodes. But next episode we'll be reading volumes 7 and 8 of Bleach. So if you've enjoyed this episode of Truth Beauty Comics, there are 3 things you can do for the podcast to support it. First is to just keep listening and tell your friends about it.
The second is to review the podcast, giving it 5 stars wherever you listen to us.
The last thing you can do is consider contributing to our Patreon with a monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get perks like access to exclusive episodes, voting on topics for upcoming episodes, and even an original drawing from Levi. But most of all, you can help make this podcast sustainable.
That's the end of the episode. You can reach us at truthbeautycomics@gmail.com or on our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and remember to take comics seriously and have fun while doing it.